Blake's universe is very much our own turned inside out. For him, reality is the realm of the artistic imagination, of which material reality is a degraded and distorted copy. In Blake's cosmos, reason pretends to rule the out-of-control emotions and the doomed body, while the imagination, which Blake considers the same as the spirit, is regarded as the enemy. This fallen world comes into being when one of the four eternal powers, Urizen, separates himself from his fellows and sets himself up as the supreme god. The first plate shows Urizen writing the law codes by which he means to control the world he has brought into being by separating himself from the other Eternals. Behind him are two tablets, suggesting those of Mosaic law, though placed under the weeping tree, they have more the appearance of tombstones. Urizen looks down, deducing his legal system from the book of nature. His commandments will be the pitiless natural laws of capitalist society. He does not realize that the book of nature, the natural world, where the fittest survive, is a diminished image of life as it actually is in eternity. Urizen, contemplating only physical reality, no longer sees eternity. He writes with both hands, describing with pitiless industry his analysis of nature which he thinks he has subjugated, and which he pinions under his foot. The doleful tree behind him echoes the tree of knowledge from Genesis, symbolizing prohibitions and suggesting Urizen's belief that he possesses all wisdom. Urizen, as the sound of his name suggests, stands primarily for the faculty of reason, the ego, which develops in a child as a means of controlling reality. The book of Urizen is a book of Genesis, describing the creation of our fallen world. For Blake, the pattern for this cataclysm is the conflicted development of the personality in adolescence. So the story begins against the background of childhood. Here we are shown a naked newborn creature welcomed into existence by a maternal spirit. This world surges with the flames of eternity, fires of love, which give off golden light and harmless warmth. The story begins when Urizen becomes truly self-aware and begins to think for himself and of himself, an independence which entails isolation from the divine family. It is, in fact, adolescence, when a child becomes something of a law unto himself. The loss of unquestioning intimacy with one's parents is a very real one, and begins a period of quite genuine mourning, familiar to, but rarely understood by everyone who has had to deal with a sulky teen. Blake's poem also describes the awakening sexuality and the abyss of adult fantasies that now open before the child who struggles to make sense of them in embarrassed secrecy. This gives a further poignant dimension to the book of nature which Urizen studies in secret. The poem goes, "Dark revolving in silent activity, unseen in tormenting passions, an activity unknown and horrible, a self-contemplating shadow," which is a very grand way of saying masturbatory fantasies. Grand language, and prudent too, considering this book was written in the pre-dawn of the 19th century. From the perspective of Urizen's struggle with sexuality, the innocent life of eternity now seems hellish. The image we are given next is of an adolescent male staring in horror at his crotch, while flames rise from his mature body. Urizen says, "First I fought with the fire, consumed inwards into a deep world within." Urizen promulgates his laws, which he explicitly describes as the result of his struggles with the unconscious sexual and violent impulses of the id. In Freudian terms, he proclaims himself the superego. He is himself supreme God, whose rule he announces, "Here alone, I in books formed of metals have written the secrets of wisdom, the secrets of dark contemplation. By fightings and conflicts dire, with terrible monsters sin bred, which the bosoms of all inhabit, 7 deadly sins of the soul. The laws that Urizen promulgates are strict oppressive fundamentalisms, and Blake is as much attacking organized religion as he is describing the formation of the superego. Urizen's laws, which condemn the natural expressions of energy and passion, crucify and demonize the eternals, who are the forces of life. They are degraded into material forms, that is, they fall, like the rebel angels Urizen considers them to be, into the hell of physical existence. The serpents here are both symbols of sin and representations of physical being. The former association is biblical, the latter is suggested by the serpent's tough, insensitive scales and the sheer narrowness of the creature, which is little more than a mobile alimentary tract. Between the 3 fallen eternals we can make out, among the punishing fires of Urizen's condemnation, 2 ghost-like faces. Material existence, despiritualized, remains haunted. Superstition is the last trace of religious feeling when the mystical spark is extinguished. Rage, fury, intense indignation, in cataracts of fire, blood, and gall, in whirlwinds of sulphurous smoke, and enormous forms of energy, all the 7 deadly sins of the soul in living creations appeared, in the flames of eternal fury. The first phase of Urizen's self-creation was his adolescent withdrawal into isolation, where he attempted to bring his changing existence under control by making rational laws. But his activities involved the other eternals in his fall. This had particularly dire consequences for a second eternal, Los, the imagination. First we are shown Los in a panic, circling the terrible phenomenon Urizen has become. And Los, round the dark globe of Urizen, kept watch for eternals, to confine the obscure separation alone. Originally, Urizen was united with Los, for even dreams have their own logic. Now, Los wept howling around the dark demon, and cursing his lot, for in anguish Urizen was rent from his side. Los howled in dismal stupor, groaning, gnashing, groaning, till the wrenching apart was healed. Fallen entirely into matter, Urizen takes on a material form, beginning with a skeleton, which Blake describes starting with the skull, till a roof, shaggy, wild, enclosed in an orb his fountain of thought in a horrible, dreamful slumber. Like the linked infernal chain, a vast spine writhed in torment upon the winds, shooting pained ribs like a bending cavern, and bones of solidness froze over all his nerves of joy. The next 2 plates give a metaphoric shape to Urizen's concretization. He expands in matter like a bulb pushing up from underground. In the second of these, we cannot see Urizen's head, for he has bent it forward as he heaves up a boulder with his neck and shoulders. Los, whom Blake calls the eternal prophet, is the imagination. This is not just what we think of as the imagination nowadays, but the ability to form thoughts from images and associations. For years before we learn to reason abstractly, this imagination creates the world for us, rendering it in forms that have meaning, and the full use of this imagination in adulthood is what we know as art. Los, the imagination, is a smith in Blake's mythology. The process of Urizen's materialization is described in the poem as Los melting, then forging Urizen like metal. The eternal prophet heaved the dark bellows, and turned restless the tongs, and the hammer incessant beat, forging chains new and new, numbering the links, hours, days, and years. In this plate we see Urizen, his formation near complete, literally and figuratively change in matter. The version we have been looking at, an 1818 printing now in the Library of Congress, omits the chains, which are visible in other versions, such as this 1794 copy now at Yale. Anguished Los sits beside Urizen, his hammer in his hand in the lower right corner. Here we have another view of Urizen's gestation. The material world is represented by water, and Urizen is swimming up into existence. Los is horrified by the dismal form he has helped Urizen assume, and Blake here shows us pity personified, active in Los's mind. Los wept, obscured with mourning. His bosom earthquaked with sighs. He saw Urizen deadly black, in his chains bound, and pity began, in anguish, dividing and dividing, for pity divides the soul. Pity is shown as an airy female spirit separating the dark, cloudy emotions that would otherwise collide in a storm of anger. Pity divides the soul by changing the will's direction from fear, disgust, or anger to compassion. Through the eyes of pity, Los now perceives Urizen's fall into matter as a descent through the air of a cloudy being, Urizen's most sympathetic depiction thus far. Urizen's symbolic animal is the eagle, so his most unfallen form is that of a wind spirit. In the following plate we can see, at center, Los, whose blacksmith arts have created Urizen's physical form, putting the finishing touches and colors to Urizen's skull, or perhaps his world, with an outstretched hand. Around Los, counterclockwise from upper left, we have the metamorphoses of Urizen from eagle, his eternal form, to youth, to mature man, to graybeard. Here we have the materialization of Urizen expressed in the element of fire, completing the series which has already shown him in earth, water, and air. Since this book describes the creation by Urizen of our physical world, it is quite fitting that he be shown coming to be in all four elements. We turn now from Los's sympathetic views of Urizen to the birth of pity, which is here not only an emotion, but an independent being. First she emerges from Los like a monstrous ovum. Thus the eternal prophet was divided before the death image of Urizen. The expanding eyes of immortals beheld the dark visions of Los and the globe of life-blood trembling. The globe of life-blood trembled, branching out into roots, fibrous, writhing upon the winds, fibers of blood, milk, and tears. From this globe of pity emerges Enitharmon, who represents beauty. As Los is the archetypal artist, Enitharmon, beauty, is naturally his love. The text on this plate describes Los's initial vision of Enitharmon. The first female, now separate, pale as a cloud of snow, waving before the face of Los. Los's face expresses hopeless longing, and his forgotten hammer dangles from his hand. Blake is suggesting that the artistic impulse, the need to create beauty, is a sublimation of sexual and emotional drives. Thus, Enitharmon becomes the unattainable ideal of artistic endeavor. Los's relation with Enitharmon also owes much to the poetic notion of courtly love. Los saw the female and pitied. He embraced her. She wept. She refused in perverse and cruel delight. She fled from his arms, yet he followed. Blake took rather a dim view of the romantic norms of his times, which owed so much to sexual repression and refined sentimentality. Nature takes her course, and Enitharmon becomes pregnant. Enitharmon, groaning, produced a man-child to the light. A shriek ran through eternity, and a paralytic stroke at the birth of the human shadow. Delving earth in his resistless way, howling, the child with fierce flames issued from Enitharmon. The child of Los and Enitharmon, Orc, is the spirit of rebellion. He is the final consequence of Urizen having set up his tyrannic laws. Here we see in a landscape of smoldering resentment the family group Los, Enitharmon, and Orc. The chain that hangs from Los's neck is on one level his romantic subjugation to Enitharmon, but another level of meaning is provided by the poem. They named the child Orc. He grew, fed with milk of Enitharmon. Los awoke her, O sorrow and pain. A tightening girdle grew around his bosom. In sobbings he burst the girdle in twain, but still another girdle oppressed his bosom. In sobbings again he burst it, again another girdle succeeds. The girdle was formed by day, by night was burst in twain. These falling down on the rock into an iron chain, in each other link by link locked. Los is caught in the chain formed by the heart-constricting anxieties that girdle his chest in all his waking hours. The fraught relationship with prudish Enitharmon has been worsened by the appearance of the child with whom Los must now share her affections. The plate is a family portrait of the Oedipal conflict. Urizen, like the cosmos he has created, is bound by the consequences of his tyranny. His head shines in the darkness with the radiance of the fallen star he is. He weeps, but his eyes are closed, because his pity is only for himself. Urizen explored his dens, mountain, moor, and wilderness, with a globe of fire lighting his journey, a fearful journey, annoyed by cruel enormities, forms of life on his forsaken mountains, and his world teemed vast enormities, frightening, faithless, fawning portions of life. Urizen explores the world he has set in motion, holding a globe of fire, which is enlightenment reduced to a tool for physical exploration. Most Urizen sicken to see his eternal creations appear, sons and daughters of sorrow on mountains, weeping, wailing. These are the four elements: Thiriel, who is air, Utha, water, Grodna, earth, and Phuzon, fire. First Thiriel appeared, astonished at his own existence, like a man from a cloud born. And Utha, from the waters emerging, laments. Grodna rent the deep earth, howling, amazed. His heavens immense cracks like the ground parched with heat. Then Phuzon flamed out, first begotten, last born. All his eternal sons in like manner, his daughters from green herbs and cattle, from monsters and worms of the pit. The daughters are Urizen's less immediate creations. These are the animate beings formed from commixtures of the initial four elements. Urizen surveys the wretched world he has created with law and reason, which is in fact the modern industrial world of economic inequality and hypocritical charity. The ox in the slaughterhouse moans, the dog at the wintry door, and he wept, and he called it pity, and his tears flowed down on the winds. Urizen views the world he has created with hands up in horror. He is turned away from the viewer because his dismay at his creation is something he keeps secret. This is the final image of Urizen, the father god of official Christianity, draped in the net of religion in which he entraps souls. His massive foot is placed forward over the world he has subjugated.